Welcome to the Connect to Metrics podcast. My name is Will Gladhart. I'm the president of Connect to Metrics. We're a premier provider of analytics solutions that drive growth and performance. Connect to Metrics is for executive coaches, consultants, and other types of service providers who want to bring additional value and solutions to their clients. I'm here with my guest today, Diana Alt. Good afternoon, Diana.
Hey, Will.
Hey, how's it going?
It's Thursday, or as I like to call it, Friday Eve.
Yes, good point. Probably like yourself, it's been a long week, but a very productive one. Cool. Well, so Diana, the past several weeks at Connect to Metrics, we've been discussing some of the challenges organizations and business leaders are facing when dealing with uncertainty in these rapidly changing times where the environment changes week to week, and also how we can help. I've spoken with a number of executives, executive coaches, growth consultants, and organizational development teams. It's how they are assisting their workforce, how our think tank analytic solutions are empowering their leaders and employees, and what critical, immediately addressable issues they're discovering about their organizations by participating in our Culture Think Tank Pulse Polls. So Diane and I are here today for a casual discussion about what she has learned as a leader and consultant during this challenging time, how she has helped clients and the communities she serves, trends she is observing in the workforce or among clients, and then any culture, connection, and engagement challenges either you personally or your clients are facing. Do you have anything to add to our discussion today, Diana?
Oh gosh, no. I feel like that's a wide range already. So
Perfect. So let's get rolling, and I look forward to introducing Diana. Diana Alt is the connector and problem solver. She loves to use her specific skill set gathered through 20 plus years in corporate product development roles, helping people manage both their business and career. Diana helps people get out of their own way so they can unleash their awesomeness onto the world. She is guided by the principle that work should feel good, not like a long, slow march into oblivion. Diana and I met at a fellow Network Connections monthly business book club. She had shared several excellent insights on the topic related to the book that we were reviewing about coaching and employee engagement. So I knew we had to meet during that session. So she's been a fantastic mentor and is amazing to bounce strategy and ideas off of. And of course, she's become a good friend. So thanks again for joining me today, Diana.
oh, thanks, Will. I think it's so interesting that you say, hey, I've been a mentor to you, because I think basically we decided to mentor each other a little bit, and we can't get rid of each other. So
Yeah, well, great minds come up with even greater ideas. So it's been a good match. Although I miss being able to get together in person over maybe a fantastic batch of pork rinds and appetizers. So yeah, we'll hopefully be able to do that again soon.
I almost suggested that we should have brains during this particular podcast, but
I love it. So, Diana, with the vast majority of our workforce working remotely and somewhat disconnected, and work situations changing, somewhat dramatically every week with either news about health, COVID, dealing with an overload of information, I'd like to tap into your consultative expertise to address the challenges you are observing and the positive wins that you have experienced. I'm really looking forward to you sharing some of the helpful tips for employees and leaders that they can immediately implement for success at the end of our podcast. So you noted in some of our pre-roll discussion that work should feel good, and one of your core beliefs. So can you tell me how that relates to what people are dealing with right now?
well, yeah, I certainly can. So work should feel good is one of those things that sometimes people challenge me on, because they're like, what does that even mean? And are you just encouraging people that they should always get their own way at the office or anything like that? And that's not at all what work should feel good is about. Work should feel good is about people get a lot more life satisfaction if their work life is good. And typically, if work life feels off, it's in one of three areas. It's either that you just aren't, the work you're doing is not a right fit for your skills and your purpose and your strengths, which is, hey, you may need to go find another line of work. Another thing is your work might not be the right environment. So let's say, for example, I have a lot of clients that are project managers and developers on my career coaching side of my business. They might not feel respected. They might not have autonomy, mastery, good leadership, those types of things. And then the other thing is work should feel good in the sense that it works with your life. So you need to be able to mesh your work in with your actual life goals and your life design. What I'm seeing right now during the middle of the pandemic is that for the most part, people are challenged the most about environment and how do we put our work to match up with our life. So we've had to work, I've worked through that both with some individual clients that I work with one-on-one, as well as a couple of consulting clients. One of my most interesting case studies has been my client that's a financial advisor. He has a team of 4 people, and they always have all worked in the office every single day. They like it that way. That's just how they've done their business. And about 24 to 48 hours before things started happening in Kansas, like our governor canceling schools for the rest of the year or stay-at-home orders really starting to happen, I had a meeting with this client, and I was working with them on other communications stuff and some other projects we had going on. And I asked, what are y'all doing about COVID? And they said, well, we don't need to worry about this. Like, we're fine. I said, what are you going to do if you get told you have to close your office for 4 weeks? And they couldn't believe that that was even a possibility at the time, even though that was just starting to happen on the West Coast in particular. So I got to help take a client that had nothing on their radar and had no intention of sending everybody home and manage them through the process of how do we send our team home, and now I'm managing them through how to bring them back. So it's definitely been more of a culture shock in some industries than others.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned during our pre-roll call about a topic about focusing on direction and like self-directed teams. I think you
Yeah.
kind of gave a good example with how you were working with your financial client, helping them to achieve success by not only going remotely, but then as they start to come back together. So could you share a little more about that?
I definitely can. So some of my background in corporate was working in agile development teams, and one of the main principles behind agile development is we're going to let the software engineers and testers and product managers figure out how they can build their product, make their thing, instead of having executives try to micromanage every single detail. Well, when I started working with my financial advising client, he actually had the same objective for his operations team, because he did not want to be in that situation where they came to him for every little decision. And it's really hard for everybody. If you've never managed a team that way, it's hard to let go of authority. And if you've never been managed that way, it's very difficult. So before the pandemic even happened, probably a couple months before that, my client and I had been talking about this. Then suddenly everybody went home, because they had to go home because all their children were at home. Like, they're going to be at home whether the boss wants them to be at home or not. And so we talked through a lot of different things, including me coaching the owner of that firm a lot on the fact that you now have to let go of who is doing what, how. You've got to focus on what the team has to do and what the outcomes are. So as a team, if clients have asked for trades to happen, they have to happen within a certain period of time, or my client risks his license to be a financial advisor. There's no question that has to happen. But the team needed to focus on those types of things instead of focusing on Mary is going to take care of all trades between exactly 9 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. And another team member is going to do follow-up communications with the clients in exactly this way by the next day. That couldn't happen anymore because some clients had kids that were at home that they were homeschooling. Some clients were shifting their work schedules around because their or not their parents, but their spouses were always working at home. You kind of had to blow up some of the notions of we're going to do everything exactly the same way with the same people. So it was an objective that the company has had, is to be a little bit more self-managed and let the team be more autonomous, and the pandemic has accelerated it. So now, since they're starting to come back to the office, we're talking about things like, does he implement a work from home where everybody can work from home a day or two a week, or we don't care when they're in the office? They're not quite ready to pull the trigger on that just yet because they still have evolution. They still have evolution in becoming more autonomous and everybody trusting each other more. But that was never on the table 6 months ago, that they would ever even consider, people can work at home because it's better for their life.
I think you address a really great point about people being able to shift, but also owners of companies and leaders being open to shifting and pivoting very rapidly to not only serve their employees, but also continue to propagate the culture they've established in the office, but also establish that culture in a remote fashion. But I think we're going to see over the next maybe 6 months plus, the challenge that you addressed is how do you bring people back, but what is the right balance? Is it a couple days a week that employees are home, or do we come together for team meetings? How do we continue to grow our managers and leaders and our performers when we may not be together?
Yeah.
So
It's a
it's a big piece of the puzzle. So
It's a really great point, and especially I think it was either yesterday or the day before that the big news that came out is that Twitter has decided to let people choose to work from home forever.
yep,
Which
Google, Twitter, yep.
there's a few companies that were doing that, and what's so interesting is if you would ask me last year this time, who are the companies where everybody is working at home? In my space, I do a lot with product management, and so I would have listed AHA, which is a product management road mapping and software company. And I would have listed Envision, which is like a user experience design company. And I would have listed them quickly because there aren't a lot of other ones in that space that are very open about being so remote friendly or, always distributed. I think what we're going to see a year from now is that that's not as much of a differentiator, especially in tech anymore, because more companies are going to do what Twitter has. Like one conversation I've had with a couple of people is that commercial real estate better watch it, because there's a lot of people that are just going to not renew leases and like that if they are leasing to knowledge work companies. So
yeah, that's a great point, because our offices with Connectometrics are in PlexPod in the Crossroads, and we love the ability to be able to rotate between all the Plex pods if needed. Of course, we haven't been in the office until just recently, this past week, just with a few of us getting back together to be able to do projects that we weren't able to do completely remotely. And it's fascinating that looking at the co-work spaces out there, how they're flexing to handle individuals that have wound down their office somewhere else or were small teams, and now they're potentially looking at coming to a co-working space just to utilize the in-person functions of team meetings, whiteboards, production, what have you. So it's really interesting watching this, and you touch on a specific culture and engagement piece where some of the things we've been studying is how do you keep your remote people connected, but also how do you give them a sense of that you are looking out for them, but also how do you do it in an anonymous way that protects them from any sort of fallout or backlash at the company. So it's some things that we've been looking at in terms of reporting sentiment, the analytics of need, and what employees are experiencing right now, but also what leaders are experiencing. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that I've observed in this whole thing, I have a lot of friends kind of up and down the food chain. I've got executive friends, I've got kind of people that are in like maybe middle management, and then I've got people that are individual contributors of all levels and seniority that are in my circle. And the thing I think has gotten really lost is that how hard it is on middle management and executives to work through this time, because they are doing everything that they can to keep the wheels on the bus.
Right.
But and also they're spending a lot of effort and energy, the good ones aren't anyway, trying to think about what is going on in the hearts and minds and families of their workers that could be distracting them from work, all while they're struggling under the same uncertainty, and their parents and their wives and children are struggling under the same uncertainty. One interesting thing that I was thinking about last week as I was working on the comeback plan with my financial advising client is that there's all kinds of different reasons and concerns, and everybody has a different level of freaked out right now about the notion of returning to regular society. Like I'm the person I'm a little bit of a homebody introvert, but the minute that you told me I couldn't go out and do all the things, of course I suddenly wanted to do all the things. Other people are hesitant to come out even as all the stay-at-home orders are coming to expire and things are opening back up. And what I realized is that there was a wide range. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom are things like physical safety and security. You know, you have the physiological and the security needs, and then you go up the food chain up into self-actualization. And everybody that I was talking to was at a different point on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in one case, I was talking to a leader about how do I bring people back and get them engaged, and we can continue with growth of the company and career planning and strategy and all this stuff that's very self-actualization. And meanwhile, there were people on his team that are scared to leave the house, and they're like bleaching the outside of the pizza box if they get pizza delivered from Minsky's, or they've refused takeout during the entire quarantine because they're that scared. And so there's this mismatch between self-actualization, physical safety, and security, and everyone's annoying each other. You know, the person that's worried about safety thinks that this is a jerk because they want them to go out into the world when they're not ready for it because they're afraid they're going to die or they're going to spread this to their grandparents or whatever. And then you have the executive that's like, we got stuff to do. Like, I need you to come back, and we got stuff to do and everything in between. So I think if you see tension as people are coming back to the office, if folks are seeing tension or hesitation, it could be really useful to just go back out on the Google, read the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, think about the objections and the conversations that people are having, and figure out, are we at a different point on this pyramid? Because if you are and you're not recognizing it, you cannot make progress.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, and that's something that fortunately some of our solutions at Connectometrics, with the analytics solutions and then the pulse polls, the analytic dashboards and word clouds, you can actually see those immediate needs pinpointed and look at the disconnect between leadership as well as the middle management and just general employees, and then so identify maybe one or two things that is the immediate challenge in the organization, and then actually take action over a 2-week period and see a change. So that's one piece that we've been able to excel in, is having that data immediately available and updated live 24 hours a day over a 14-day period, so leaders, but also employees, can address those challenges, but not feel that they're being singled out because they have a concern.
I have a super fun idea for you on that just came to me. So if you have a way in those pulse polls that you're doing, the sentiment analysis ones, sometimes it's not about, am I a leader or an individual contributor, of whether I'm freaked out. It could be about totally different reasons. But most companies that I'm hearing talk about their go back plans, they're doing it in stages. I'm going to bring 20% of people back. I'm going to have the advanced team, or we're going to, work 3 days a week this week, things like that. I would encourage you to see if there's a way people can parse that data to find those resources that are a little bit more willing to come back early. And instead of saying IT has to come back early, or we're going to bring the executives back early, see if you can get a cross-functional set of people that just have to be willing to accept the risk.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. I'll have to talk to one of our other partners and see how that might work. But that would be a really fascinating case study to look at.
Yeah.
Who's willing to jump on board first, and then be part of the lead team, and then as the other phases roll out for people's level of comfort. I love that idea. I've definitely be talking about it to the team this next week.
Yeah, I really like the idea of also doing it where if you can find people from all levels, because if your boss is telling you to come back, or if all the vice presidents went back for a week or two and then they're trying to get the minions to come back, or the individual contributors, I shouldn't say minions, that's not nice, but kind of the individual contributor core to come back, that might not be as powerful as if there's some people that are in your individual contributor world that are willing to accept the risk. Because then they can say, hey, Joe, like, no, Jim is not a jerk for making us come back, and they've set things up, and here's why it's safe at work, and here's why we're going to be okay. It's more powerful from a peer than it is from your superior in many cases. And so you can use those people as change agents to come back to the office.
Yeah, that's fantastic insight, and I think it really highlights how to bridge the gap of some of those engagement and culture challenges as people move to being more social, getting back together, those pieces. So I wanted to ask if you had any specific, maybe 1 to 2 tips about leadership, something you've learned from this period that people could implement immediately to help them be successful. Usually, I highlight individuals usually have 1 to 2 tips that they can share, and it usually can be very effective for leaders or employees to implement those. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So one of my favorite tips, actually, Alana Mueller stole whenever she did your podcast last week or whenever that was, which is check in on people. A lot of time, and check in with them as a human is what I mean. So going and touching people, especially in the sense of you're a workforce that may be coming back, and having a one-to-one personal interaction of how do you feel about this is incredibly valuable. And of course, you would think managers would do that with their employees, but I think it's good for peers to do that too, especially when they've been distributed. Sometimes there's a legitimate unaddressed concern that multiple people have, and if they're not willing to talk like people instead of like workers, it can't get uncovered.
Yes.
So checking in of how are you doing? How are you feeling about this? What do you think that the plan should be for us to go back to the office or something like that can get some really good organic information if they aren't using pulse polls or they don't have another way to gather that. Another thing that I would say is to really, really think hard about what you can control. So if there is any specific thing that I've been called weird about during the pandemic, it's that I have not been freaked out enough. Like I've had people in my family that are just like, why are you not more scared? And the fact is, I can't do anything. I can't do anything about the fact that there's a global virus. I mean, yeah, we can say, oh, you can wear masks and you can stay at home and stuff like that. And of course, I've been doing those things. But remembering we can't control when this is going to be quote unquote over. It's not ours to fix. It's ours to manage like adults. It actually takes pressure off me to realize that I can't fix it. Similarly, give grace to other people that are frustrating you because they can't fix it either. There's no single human that can fix this. And it's frustrating at first, but if you really sit with that idea for a while and figure out what can I do that is constructive and in my control, it becomes a lot easier to get through this. So that's
absolutely. That's some excellent feedback. And, I think you bring a really good point about asking individuals how they were doing in a capacity of just as a person or as a friend. Because I will share with you that during this period, there have been a lot of individuals I've reached out with and checked in or connected to. And a lot of these individuals are CEOs, executives, executive coaches. And my point of reaching out to them was just 1, to touch base, but 2 was to ask how they were doing. And the number of people that responded that said, you're the first person that has asked me how I'm doing. I'm asking all my employees, I'm asking everyone else how they are doing. No one has asked me if I'm okay. And it was staggering to me the number of people that responded that way that were in leadership roles. Because I think we just expect that as leaders or as thought leaders that we're just expected to manage and come up with the ideas and roll through it, because that's how people perceive that we typically handle those challenges. So
yeah,
I think
that's a little corollary onto that. So a lot of times when people think about checking in, they think about checking in the people that they're really close to. Yes. So I'm going to check in with my mom. I'm going to check in with my sister. I'm going to check in with my closest colleagues at the office. But the most powerful check-in that I personally did, where I reached out to someone, was from a girl that I went to high school with that I haven't seen in the flesh in probably 15 years, 20 years, something like that. Her son had a car wreck right before COVID. So he was in the hospital when nobody was allowed to visit.
Oh.
And she was out of work, not because of being laid off from the virus, but because she was taking care of her son, who was just a teenager or 20 years old, something like that. And I reached out to her and I'm like, are you okay? It was also when a lot of people were concerned. There was a lot of stuff floating around on social media of, if you don't have food, like, let me take care of you because this stimulus isn't coming yet. Like, I want to help you. And I was worried about this woman because, I mean, if she needed groceries, I was going to send her an Instacart. We were going to take care of this. Similarly, on the receiving end, one of the most powerful things that happened to me is a person that I knew in college that lives in the KC area, but I don't see him often, just said, hey, I sense that you might be struggling a little bit. Do you want to do like a social distancing glass of wine in a driveway sometime? It was right before, stay at home was being lifted. Didn't want to wait 10 more days. So the fact that someone who's not in my close orbit reached out to me to say, it seems like you're a person that could use a little bit of a kindness was really meaningful. And it's probably the best day I had in the pandemic was hanging out on the patio, having some Hawaiian Brothers and some Malbec with my friends. So
Yeah, that's a great example, but I think that example illustrates as we do come back together, whether that's today, tomorrow, months from now, that we keep those type of stories as well as reconnecting in mind, but also being mindful that people do have other concerns that may be beyond our own when it's not in our particular orbit. So thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate the time that you have spent with me, but also I love the work that you do with coaching and consulting, as well as the speaking that you do, which has been on pause for a little while. But I think it's amazing service that you provide not only to your community but Kansas City in general, so and beyond. I look forward to getting together very soon for a non-social distancing batch of pork rinds and appetizers. So I hope you have a fantastic day, my friend.
thanks. Well.